Humanity is flawed, and as such, the ROG Ally is equally flawed. It doesn't mean it's bad by any stretch of the imagination, but here are 10 things I think it could do better. The first thing I want to talk about is the Windows keyboard. The Windows keyboard is unavoidable. To pull up the keyboard, you either have to A, tap the taskbar button for the keyboard, or B, use the touchscreen to touch a text entry and the keyboard will automatically pop up. But guess what though? You cannot control the keyboard with the controller controls. Yes, I know that's the norm for Windows 11, but that's stupid. And given Microsoft's partnership with ASUS, that should have been one area that they could have improved on. You know what PC handheld lets me use the keyboard with controller controls? The Steam Deck. And I'm not just talking about dual trackpad typing, as cool as that is. I'm talking about using the D-pad and A button to select letters on a keyboard, kind of like what you would do on a normal console. That would make the Ally far more usable, especially when docked. The next thing I want to talk about is changing resolution. Like when you have a game in full screen and you change the resolution, it flickers for a bit and then it changes the resolution of the screen itself. Like, that's normal and even expected behavior. But for games that run in exclusive full screen mode, if you choose to change a game's resolution to a non-native resolution, it also changes the resolution of your entire Windows instance. And that's normal. That's why borderless windowed is just the better option. But not all games have borderless windowed mode. Elden Ring is one such game, and sometimes borderless windowed isn't perfect. For example, if you lower the resolution of a game with borderless windowed on, your game looks like this. That said, most modern games would have you use render scaling instead of changing the resolution. But of course, not all games have this. Take a wild guess as to what game doesn't have that option. Elden Ring. So what's the solution here? You're just throwing out a bunch of problems with no solution. Well, believe it or not, Valve has a solution for this, and they've implemented it in SteamOS. And it's called GameScope. You know, some people say the UI is what makes the Steam Deck so incredible. And while it's certainly important, it's not what makes the Steam Deck so good. GameScope is the secret sauce that really holds the Steam Deck experience together. Let's go back to Elden Ring, but this time on the Steam Deck. You can lower Elden Ring's full screen resolution to whatever you want, and it won't change the Steam Deck's UI. It won't lower the resolution of the Steam Deck's UI. That's just one major improvement GameScope gives you. GameScope also gives you built-in FSR and frame limiters, but the resolution changing seems to be the one thing that really can't be replicated by Windows in any meaningful capacity. At least not to my knowledge. If there are any projects that work on these handheld PCs that are kind of like GameScope's resolution spoofing, please let me know. I'd love to see it in action. And if you like the video so far, be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. I would love to hit 10,000 subs by the end of this year. Next is the lack of a true Xbox guide button. This seems like such a small thing to talk about, but essentially, there isn't anything that functions as a quote-unquote Xbox button, so to speak. Sure, the Ally has 2 buttons dedicated to Armory Crate functionality in-game, but no dedicated Xbox guide button means that basically, you can't access the game bar or its useful features. At least not without turning one of your 2 macro buttons into a guide button. I think this is a massive oversight. This also prevents you from being able to use a Steam overlay if you decide to use Steam as your main UI. And even if you set one of your back buttons to the Xbox button, it pulls up both the game bar and Steam UI at the same time, which is unfortunate really. The next thing I want to talk about is Armory Crate's inability to download games. What do I mean by this? Well, it's simple really. Armory Crate can detect games that are installed, but Armory Crate can't install games for you. In order to install more Steam games, I have to minimize Armory Crate, go into Steam, then through the Steam menu, select the game I want to install, and then install it through Steam, defeating the entire purpose of Armory Crate altogether. You know, some YouTube commenter asked me why I'm even complaining about this, that this is a stupid complaint. I'm gonna take your ass to school real quick. See, there's this thing called convenience. It's inconvenient for me to have this launcher that's supposed to be convenient and bring all of my launchers in together if I can't install games from specific launchers in that launcher itself. I also know that this is not impossible to do because there are programs that do this, like for example Playknight, a general purpose launcher that's supposed to bring all of your launchers in together. By giving Playknight permissions to your library, you can actually install games directly from Playknight. The next thing I want to talk about is the D-pad. The D-pad sucks. It sucks for 2D platformers, it sucks for fighting games. The D-pad is terrible for any games that use D-pad for movement. Why does it suck though? Well, it's simple really. It's one of those circular pads. You know, the type that's on an Xbox 360. In theory, these are supposed to help you input fighting game commands better. You know, quarter circle forward, quarter circle backwards, etc, etc. The problem is it never really works in practice. More often than not, there's there's sometimes missed inputs. Sometimes when I press the cardinal direction, it'll go in a diagonal instead. It's not to say that I can't execute fighting game commands, I can do a pretzel motion on it, but it's not ideal. Next up is Armory Crate. There's a lot in Armory Crate that, simply put, needs to be fixed or implemented. For starters, there needs to be a way to force close a game. No, I'm not going to make one of the back buttons Alt F4 because I shouldn't need to. It should just be an option in the overlay. Force close a current program. Let me tell you a little revelation. Sometimes weird things happen on Windows, and as such, you need to be able to force close a program immediately. The fact that you can't do this easily really pisses me off. There is a shortcut to open up the task manager, one of the back buttons and then down on the D-pad to do so. But that's stupid, the shortcut's stupid, and that's just another step you have to do, because then you have to select your process that you want to exit. And you know, earlier I talked about power profiles, let's talk about the battery life on the ROG Ally. It's not great. See, the ROG Ally has a battery capacity of 40 watt-hours, same as the Steam Deck itself. But the Steam Deck has an SoC that only really sips power. It has great performance, and it doesn't use that much power. The ROG Ally is more performant per watt, but for whatever reason it consumes more power. It could be due to Windows, or it could just be the SoC. I'm not entirely sure. Also not helping is the fact that the ROG Ally has specific performance profiles, none of which can go down as low as the Steam Deck's lowest TDP at 3 watts. I would say most any games don't even need 9 watts. Another thing the Ally could do better is their performance overlay. Much like the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally has a little performance overlay that you can enable. The problem is it's not very detailed. It gives you battery life, frame rate, CPU and GPU usage, APU wattage, temperature. That's all very useful information, but it could be more detailed. How about a frame time graph, much like the Steam Deck? Just borrow the Steam Deck's overlay. Everything it displays, just display that on yours. One thing to note is that while I was recording footage for one of my prior videos, the overlay would just randomly disappear. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I plugged it into a capture card, or is it because of Yuzu? I'm not entirely sure. Yes, I could be using MSI Afterburner, or I could use this opportunity to tell ASUS what they should improve. Before we move on, let's get to our honorable, or rather, dishonorable mentions. Armory Crate has no UI sounds. The UI doesn't make a sound when you move around in it. I'll admit this is kind of a dumb thing to complain about, that's why it's an honorable mention. ASUS, please add some sound effects. Another dishonorable mention is the fact that the Ally feels the need to include 2 software suites. My ASUS and Armory Crate. The only real difference is that My ASUS offers you a 30-day free trial of McAfee. Gross. And can manage ASUS devices in your house, such as an ASUS router that I own. I wish ASUS just combined both of these into one single app, because having 2 just feels unnecessary. Next up is Gyro. What if I told you that the ROG Ally had Gyro built into it? Hard to believe, right? You can't even make use of it, at least not right outside of the box. There is a program that lets you use the Gyro built into the ROG Ally called Handheld Companion. My good friend The Fox has covered it on his channel, so be sure to check out that video. But aside from that though, what this really tells us is that ASUS built in a gyro that's never going to be used at all for no reason. Like, you can't even set gyro up in the Armory Crate app. Like, what is the point of putting gyro into these devices when you can't take advantage of it without a third-party software? That doesn't make a lot of sense now, does it? The solution is pretty simple. Let us use the gyro. Let us use Armory Crate, or better yet, have this read out as a DualShock 4, and then let Steam do all the hard work. And finally, you all probably saw this coming, the Windows experience on a handheld. It's easily my least favorite part. Using Windows with a touchscreen, it really isn't that much better. But trying to use the analog stick to make precise mouse movements? Get out of here. Not to mention, effective typing requires use of the touchscreen anyways, so you may as well just use that instead of the controller controls. It's a pain in the butt to have to deal with the Windows UI for all the Windows stuff. At least the Steam Deck had trackpads to make navigation not a total pain. If you want my personal opinion, for setting things up, you'll want to use a mouse and keyboard, or you'll want to remote into your ROG Ally. There were rumblings that some engineers were working on a handheld UI version of Windows, but that was all the way in April, and it turned out that Microsoft kind of canned that project. Why did they can it? That would have been perfect for the ROG Ally. You wouldn't need to rely on stupid crap like the Armory Crate system or whatever. Microsoft, you need to bring that back immediately. If you liked this video, be sure to press the thumbs up button and spread the good gospel of high-tech lowlife. And if you want to see more high-tech lowlife, be sure to subscribe and press the bell icon for notifications. And for you enlightened individuals, be sure to join my Discord server. And if you wish to support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page, links in the description down below.